I would think purpose feels like you found your love in the world. And so if I can't go force love to happen, why do I feel I could force purpose to happen? And then this Harvard psychologist says that based on his research, he said only 20% of people ever find it. So then it was like, well, shoot, why would I have this ego to say I'm one of this 20% versus the other 80 that never finds it? And so then I was like, well, I definitely can't go out there and then force it every day if I don't know it's going to happen. And also forcing is not letting it happen. I'm not doing as much discovery through my process of trying to force it. I was like logicking into it. Okay, welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid, we just did an episode before this on 2024 recap, and you mentioned my outfit. Are you getting more custom? Can I show up to every podcast?
It's growing on me quickly.
Okay.
It looks comfortable.
It is very comfortable.
It reminds me a little of, and I know I've referenced this movie to you a few times, but Defending Your Life.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a toga. I don't know what. It was a tunic. Yeah. And it looks similar. You know, he doesn't have the beanie or the feather or the beads, but I think made the comment, these are shockingly comfortable.
I was hoping you would think I was very angelic when I came in here.
Angelic wasn't the first word that came to mind. But I'll try to shift a little more that direction.
Rough on me though. I think I'm gonna undo one button.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a light linen.
Yeah, it's all linen.
And I know you have that issue with like the thicker pits. Like so.
You're right.
This could be very good for you though. You know, opens things up for those more air.
That don't know, my full body MRI showed I have really thick armpit skin.
Yeah.
So.
And did they actually conclusively say that is what generates more sweat in some people than others? Like
they didn't, but I'm gonna run with that.
Okay, because I'm wondering that about Lurch. I'm like, if you do the body scan, are you gonna be ahead of thicker than David or?
Yeah, we should do. You've heard Botox? They do Botox in like the armpits to stop it from sweating.
No, but I mean, Botox is applied in like 20 different.
Yeah.
There's like 20 different applications now. Of Botox, so that doesn't surprise me.
I would try if I wasn't not into needles, but since you got to
that's
Botox
not your jam for sure. But no, I'm now looking you more as the enlightened one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have to make sure I had to put this on after Griff was out of the house because it's too much white for a toddler to be around. He's just gonna normally wear all black because he gets so many stains on.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can get stained up pretty quickly there.
Yeah, but anyways, this for this episode we're gonna talk a little bit over the last year, some of the self-development stuff we went through, and then how that led to me transitioning out of the day-to-day of Digible, and then what I've been doing since. But also, like, it's our chance to catch up since it's been a couple months since we caught up. But the end of 23, or for me, the end of 23 is when I really decided to start focusing more on my own, I guess, self-development, self-discovery. Like, you and I have always put so much effort into the business. We were putting way less into ourselves. And that seemed to serve us for a while. But then in 23, I started to feel like I really spent most of 23 trying to figure out what my purpose was. I was like, okay, Digible is now in default alive state. How, like, is this what I should be doing or not doing? And I just struggled with that. I was kind of trying to force purpose. Have I talked to you about this part yet? So I actually got really frustrated towards November of 23, where I was like, usually when I put my mind to something and I really start researching something, like reading Second Mountain or whatever, like I feel like I can figure it out, and I couldn't figure it out. And so it's very rare that happens. So I was just very frustrated.
Couldn't figure out your purpose.
Yeah, because it's kind of like you and I have said before. It's like Digible's fun, and the problem solving that we get to do here is fun and can be rewarding, but it's not curing cancer. It's digital ads, and so is that really a good purpose? And so we took a lot for years out of like, okay, we're going to build a good culture and show that we can do it differently, where it doesn't just have to be, I guess the standard sort of business, and just treat people better. So the whole be a good role model for employee culture. And anyways, the epiphany moment I had towards the end of 23 was, if Nicole and I weren't married today, could I just go out and force love to happen? I was like, well, no, obviously not. The stars have to align. It's like, okay, then why would I think that? If I would think purpose feels like you found your love in the world, and so if I can't go force love to happen, why do I feel I could force purpose to happen? And I also read this Harvard psychologist I forget his name now.
Meaning that it will find you, or it'll come to you. It's not something that you can manufacture.
Yeah, but you have to be open to it, right? So you have to like be somewhat open and for you to discover it. And then this Harvard psychologist says that based on his research, he said 20% of people, only 20% of people ever find it. So then it was like, well, shoot, why would I have this ego to say I'm one of this 20% versus the other 80 that never finds it? And so then I was like, well, I definitely can't go out there and then force it every day if I don't know what's going to happen. And also forcing is not letting it happen. I'm not doing as much discovery through my process of trying to force it. I was like logicking into it. So I said, okay, let me calm down. This could be what takes 10 years to figure out. And then, so I ended up getting a coach then in November of 23, and it was actually part of the Tony Robbins program. I'd never done a Tony Robbins thing before, and I kind of rejected it at first because I was thinking Tony Robbins, it just feels very marketed. And so I was like, ever since I was a kid, maybe because he was on infomercials when I was a kid, it's like anything that's heavily marketed, I just pull back skeptical versus like, curiosity, let me look into this. And so I said, why do I have such an ego if he seemed to help so many people that he couldn't help me? So as I was calling different coaches in November of 23, I called the Tony Robbins coaching program, and immediately I found they were helping me in my first half hour like trial. I made big leaps, and I was like, okay, there's something here. This could be valuable. So I started working with a coach every 2 weeks, from November 23 through 24. And also last year, instead of focusing so much on the business building books, I started reading a lot more books that just seemed to be about like internal development. And one of those books that you and I haven't gotten to talk about that I really wanted to talk about was this book, Die with Zero. So I know you read it. I don't remember. And now I can't believe we've gone like 6 months like since you read it or so and not talked about it. But that book,
on air, yeah.
Yeah, well, we didn't even really talk about it much off air. I know you talked about it with many other people because they told me, like, Reid talked to me about this. But I was like, I haven't really talked to Reid about it yet.
Okay.
But that book hit me hard. I've read it 3 times now and then listened to dozens of interviews with the author.
Bill Perkins, yeah.
Yeah, Bill Perkins. And it, but yeah, let me pause there and you can give the, like, quick, your summary of that book.
Well, the title, is pretty self-explanatory, but there's a lot that stood out in that book, but just that the true measure of a person's wealth at the end of their life is experiences, not financial. And if you understand that, then you'll lead your life very differently or approach it very differently. And the sooner that you recognize that, the better. There's all sorts of kind of tactical things that he, got underneath that general sentiment, but I couldn't agree more. I mean, he starts with the fable of the grasshopper and the ant, and I don't know exactly whether he said, the best way to approach it is be a balance of the two, but I think, there was some semblance of that, where it's like the ant is just constantly work, not thinking certainly about experience, and then the grasshopper is just like indulging, like can't eat enough, quick enough, isn't thinking. And so, what does the balance look like for us as we go through our life? You don't want to be the ant, you don't want to be the grasshopper. And because he has an engineering background, I loved that, in that he was so kind of formulaic in the way that he unpacked all of that. But some of the things that stood out, I'm not giving you the summary of the book that you asked for. I'm just diving into some things that were big takeaways. But it really hits you when he's like the greatest, like the highest your net worth typically is somewhere in your mid-late 70s. And then when do you think you spend the least time spending on travel and leisure? It's also in your mid-70s. Mm-hmm. And that was just the call out on health. It's like, well, that's the reason, is you're no longer at a point where you have the energy or the health, but you do have the money, as you were talking about kind of the 3 pillars of the book and how to think about that. But the experiences, the experience dividends, just how much they pay you back throughout your life is something also that I really kind of latched onto. And so the sooner you can start doing those and stop thinking about accumulating, financial worth and where that's all going to go, it's like kind of a waste of time.
Yeah,
that's a terrible.
So
everybody knows that's a terrible summary of the book.
Those are some good tidbits. So his die was zero. I think a lot of people take to be like financial zero, which that's part of it. But he's also really zero regrets. He's kind of like, if you met God tomorrow, because it was God would say you can do everything you ever want. You just have to get the order right. And that most people get the order wrong. And to your point about like they pass with all this wealth built up. And so he says, you have three things: your health, your wealth, and your time. And a lot of times you're trading your life energy, your health, for wealth. And then by the time you accumulate enough wealth, you don't have a lot of time or health left, but you have all this wealth. So that's your whole thing of like you peak in your 70s. So he believes that most people sort of go on autopilot. Like they are conditioned early to almost like the American dream is almost like a false thing to go after, where you shouldn't be working super hard and be like, I'll enjoy life when I retire at 65 or 70, but you should be enjoying it throughout. So he's, originally he was really into the FIRE movement, the financially independent, retire early, but his exercises are simple to basically write your bucket list down, then put it on a timeline of your life and say, what decade would I most enjoy hiking Machu Picchu or what have you, and then go find a way to do it, because you may not hike Machu Picchu when you're 70. You should spread it out so that, to your point, you mentioned memory dividends. If you do it when you're 30, because that's when you're going to get maximum enjoyment out of that activity, you have all those memory dividends for the next 40 or 50 years through the rest of your life. And so we have been I in particular have been so consumed at the company and in the building and the success, and I had a very I guess, I don't know if it was necessarily scarcity mindset, but I was definitely felt very financially insecure. After I left my parents' house at 18 through now, I didn't feel like I had a backup plan. And so I was like, I got to work to make sure I don't have to work when I'm 70. It's like, okay, but after reading the book, it's like, so what if you have to work when you're 70? Because let's say that you happen to make it to 70, because he has different anecdotes in the book of people that don't, they have a sudden health crisis or whatever, then you worked for no reason. And also, if you just may not get the same memory dividends or enjoy it the same way, that you would have when you were 30 or 40 or whatever. And so as I thought about that, I was like, okay, cool. And let me put my bucket list on a timeline or whatever. And when I look at that, it's like, shoot, most of the stuff on my bucket list is stuff that I would only enjoy, or that I would get the most enjoyment out of, frankly, either earlier or like the next 10 years. After the next 10 years, because he has all this data in there about your health and wealth sort of intersecting at between 50 and 55. Like that's where your body will break, like it's already sort of breaking down, but it'll sort of peak, your peak wealth to health ratio will peak between 50 and 55. So then if I think about it, it's like, man, a lot of this stuff I want to do is like, let me go do Machu Picchu or whatever. And so I better get to that now. And then he makes the point, so what, like if you have to go back to work like 10 years from now, like if you're not interested in traveling, your body can't hold up to do those adventures anyway, what's the big deal? Like might as well be working behind a computer then versus now. And so all that stuff really helped me see differently and say like, okay, why don't I go do some of these adventures that I want to do now? And then, see where it takes me.
That's great, man. I'm super happy for you / jealous. I can't wait to hear about every adventure, and you obviously showed up in a whole different aura. So I think it's already taking root, and you should share a little bit. I think it was Chile first, and I don't know where else you've been, or if you've been anywhere else, but I know you have some plans for some other pretty exotic, I guess, destinations or adventures.
Yeah, so I stepped back in December, and immediately I went to Chile and did a few mountains over 20,000 feet, and then I did Argentina and did Aconcagua, which is the tallest mountain outside of, I got to tell you this story, tallest mountain outside of Asia. So, okay, I'll tell some, I wasn't planning to, but I'm going with this professional athlete, Ty, and he has the record on something like 70 different mountains for like speed records, and he helped me do, instead of hiking Machu Picchu, we ran to Machu Picchu last summer. So that's how I first met Ty, and we clicked, and he was like, hey, I'm doing this expedition, down to Chile. Do you want to go? I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And then like a few weeks later, he's like, I've also got a guy that's asking me to like fly him to Argentina after that and do Aconcagua. It's one of the 7 summits, which means like 7 summits are the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents. So it's like a big thing to go after. He's like, do you want to join? I was like, okay. So it's back to me saying yes more often.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we get there to Chile, and there's like 10 people that he has for this retreat, and we're living in the middle of a national park with no running water, no showers for I think it was like 10 days without a shower, and you're sleeping at like 15 or 16,000 feet, and it's like normally you would like go to like 15 or 16,000 feet and you'd like acclimate for like a week or two. Instead, it's like every other day we're doing a mountain. So it's like first mountain's like 18,000 feet, then 19,000 feet, then 20,000 feet. And these other people are pretty accomplished folks. And they're just dropping like flies. Like by the end of those 8 days, I think we did 5 mountains in 8 days. With finishing on Ojos. Ojos is the 2nd tallest mountain outside of Asia, and it's so gnarly. You get up to this like 22,000 something feet, and you have to start rock climbing. So then you have to like harness up and like rock climb this thing with like 30, 40 mile an hour winds, where most people are taking like 6-inch steps and waiting and like catching their breath, because your oxygen is just, it's like something like 40% of like at versus sea level. So it's like you are just, it's rough. Anyways, we started with like 10 or 12 people, and by the end, there's only 2 of us that summit Ojos, because everyone else is dropping like flies. And each of these adventures are like 6 to 12 hour like stints every other day. So it's like intense. Then we're supposed to fly from Ojos. And normally people would spend 2 weeks to basically do Ojos. So now in like a week and a half, we've done all that. And we are flying to Argentina, me and this other guy, to go do Aconcagua. And on the flight there, we're originally going to take 5 days or something to do Aconcagua, which normally Aconcagua is a 2 to 3 week expedition. So we're already cutting down the expedition. And we get a severe weather alert saying like, hey, when you're there, the winds on the summit are going to be like over 60 miles an hour below, like, it's going to be worse than 20 degrees below zero plus wind chill. And I was like, so you're not going to be able to summit. They're like, well, shoot, man, we're flying all the way to Chile or to Argentina now. Like, we can't not do it. So we quickly decide like, okay, we're going to do it in 1 day.
Oh my God.
And so we fly from Ojos, we drive to Aconcagua, and instead of hiking into the park, we quickly charter a helicopter to like take us up to base camp. And at first I'm like, this is awesome. Helicopter rides seem cool. What a badass thing. And I haven't even told Nicole this, but the moment the helicopter lands to pick us up, it's the last helicopter of the day. The only chance we're going to get to get up there and try the summit with a 1 day timeline. And they're immediately taking two people out on stretchers. And I was like, whoa, okay. I thought this was fun and games. I knew that they have a 30% success rate of summiting. So normally people take those 2 or 3 weeks and it's a 30% chance to summit, but it's not. Yes, there are injuries and deaths on that mountain, but a lot of that is just people just turn back. But then to like get the wake up call of like these 2 stretchers coming off,
right in front of you,
and it's like now you get on the helicopter and go up there. I was like, oh shoot! So we get up.
Shot of adrenaline.
We get up there, and they do like. We get Ty is famous because he had the record on this before, and he actually, the way he gets us in with the helicopter and to avoid a lot of this stuff is he says, hey, I'll set the record again. So we get up there and they let us do 1 medical exam versus 2, but then the requirement is basically he has to now go try and set the record. So he goes and like right after this day 1 goes up to the from base camp to the summit and back and sets the record by like 4 minutes or something.
Wow.
And
how old is Ty?
35.
Okay.
And so normally people go from base camp, and I think there's 3 camps after base camp. And normally people are going up to a base camp and then back down, or going up and staying for 2 or 3 days, then go to the next camp. So that's why it takes 2 or 3 weeks, because they'll do like from base camp to camp 1, and then they'll like sleep 3 days or whatever. And we're going to blow past every camp and go straight to the summit and back. And anyway, so Ty sets the record, and then 12 hours later, he's got to take me up the summit, because this is our only chance with the weather window. And so sure enough, like we go up and we do the summit, we come back down, it's like, and now we got to grab a chopper out of here. It's because otherwise we're going to get basically weather locked in, and I'll miss Christmas. So I was like, all right, now we're choppering right back out. So it was super gnarly.
Holy shit.
And a lot of fun. Oh, Reid's hitting the applause button.
If that doesn't demand some applause, I don't know what does. That's incredible, man.
Yeah.
So what kind of, I don't know, mental state, physical state were you in when you got back?
Well, the summit day, I was in really rough shape because I had caught some sort of like bug. I had like some sort of like head cold and chest problem. Oh. So me and one other, there were 4 of us on the mountain that went together, but only 2 of us made it up, me and Ty. And 2 of us, me and this other guy, Chris, we got this like really bad sickness where I was just bedridden until it was time to go up. And so I was like hacking stuff up. And also, I was like, okay, it's only like it gets to negative 20 degrees in wind chill, but it's fine. I run outside in like one layer because I'm always moving real fast. So it's like I never worry about like my extremities freezing or whatever. What I didn't realize before is that when you lack oxygen, your body is pulling like doesn't send oxygen to your extremities because it's trying to like keep your organs in check. So your extremities get super cold. Even so, like 0 degrees Fahrenheit does not feel the same in Colorado as it does at 20,000 feet.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
So I stupidly only had one set of hand warmers, but really what I needed was foot warmers because we started like 3 a.m. and going from base camp to camp 1, I was like, dude, I think I'm gonna have to turn back because I started to lose all feeling in my toes and fingers. So we stayed like over an hour in camp 1 where I just put my feet over a fire trying to get the blood flow back into my feet so that we could go up. And then I was able to put some hand warmers in the feet and then like let me just try to make it the rest of the way up the mountain. So in fact now, another reason I didn't come barefoot in today is because if I stand on tile floor, my feet feel like they're getting electric like shock through the toes, the tips of the toes, because they got damaged from the cold. So I can't stand on like a tile floor right now without my feet lighting up.
Is that gonna go away?
Yeah, I'm told that like your nerve endings like grow back, but they're slow and stuff. But anyway, so I came out alive and it's a good story, but
it's a great story.
Pretty intense.
Well, connect that back to where we were starting, I guess, purpose, because you quickly transitioned to the book, and we both, I guess, believe in a lot, if not most of of his principles. So do you feel like your purpose is clear? Are you still figuring that out? And how did this experience you're describing either fulfill or impact your walkabout, your search for purpose?
Yeah, where I'm trying to remind myself every day is that right now the purpose is just searching or trying things, experimenting, and allowing
opening yourself up.
Yeah, opening myself up for it to arrive, and also getting clear that could take a decade, or it could take longer, or it could never happen. Back to that 80% never find it. But right now it's more about like let me try. Like open myself up to those things, experiment, and then see where that takes me. And instead of usually I'm very like goal focused and like the path to achieve the goal. Right now, it's interesting because it would be nice for the goal to be like find the purpose. And yet I may not arrive at that goal. Instead, it's like the path is let me experiment, open myself up, try these new things for now. But it could take 10 years. And so, and I'm trying to get joy in that, but it's also very hard to find, to see the mile markers passing by. Like, it's not like, oh, what's our revenue now versus the month before, or like how much of a better person are you today than you were yesterday? Mm-hmm. I haven't figured out a good way to like notice that kind of growth. So, I'm still working through that, and I'm, I guess, getting comfortable with the fact that I may not be able to measure the progress as well.
Yeah. How are you defining purpose?
That's a great point. I took that more to be like where you are just pumped every day to get up. Like it feels like you have this higher meaning, kind of that thing that other people describe it, whether it's like it sounds like spiritual when other people talk about finding their purpose. But yeah, for me, I guess it's more of like, what am I here to do?
Well, I'm going to latch on to the greater calling in a way that you're referencing, because what gets you out of bed, if you use that not as a definition, but to help measure, I guess, or identify whether you found your purpose, is something that I'm gonna use writing for myself. I'll turn it inward here for a second. And I don't know if this will be true, but I enjoy writing, and I could see that being something that would excite me if I knew that that's all I was going to be doing, is getting up each morning and doing some creative writing or some version of writing. But I don't know if I'd say that's a greater calling in a way, or something that is, I don't know, giving back. So I'm just like, can purpose be really selfish? I know that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
But where it's like, this is totally self-fulfilling, because that's what gets me out of bed every day. But me writing may not, like, if I never published it, would it no longer qualify as a purpose? Because I'm not imparting that, giving that, paying it forward, legacy, impacting anyone. It's just something I love to do. Or does purpose have to have some element of, giving? Like,
yeah. I've got answers to this. So that Harvard psychologist, he says that that's what a lot of people get wrong, is that they think that purpose has to be tied to some altruistic cause. And he's like, that can put you on the wrong path. Because sure, there should be the Mother Teresas and the Gandhis or whatever, and the Nelson Mandelas, but not everybody should be that way. And then so now let me transition to the Tony Robbins program. What they have you do is they try to say, I think you and I have talked about this, what are the 5, just let's say about 5, what are the 5 categories of life that are important to you? And so you go through this exercise, and they say, think of it like a wheel. This will be for the audience, but or a pie, but you've got a circle, and it's divided evenly into, let's say, 5 to 8 categories. But if you can get the 5, that's great. And so I did my financial, my fun, my friends, my family, and fitness. Those are I did all Fs. And then they say rate those 1 to 10. And what you then use that wheel for is, like, my fun category was like a 2 or a 3, and my friends was a 2 or a 3, but my financial, my family, my fitness were 8s. And they're like, so that's a very uneven wheel.
As far as your priorities or your current satisfaction levels? Okay.
Of 10. And so since I was really lacking in fun and friends, they would say, hey, you're putting a lot of effort still in the financial, or a lot of effort in the family. You need to redirect some of that energy to get these other things to be more even with those other ones. And so that was very eye-opening for me, the beginning of 24. And
because their overall theory is you want to achieve mastery of balance.
Yeah, you want to be a balanced. They say, like, if you're a car going down the highway, you want your wheels to all be as circular as they can. So try to
That's
get.
That's what I assumed. I don't know if I agree with that, but I'll roll with it.
And then they say, great, what is something that connects all 5 of these, or whatever? So I had 5. And so think of it like the hubcap. What's the hubcap that you want to have as a common theme for all of them? And for me, I really struggled with this because I was looking for some altruistic thing at first. And then my coach was like, similar to the Harvard guy, was like, hey, it doesn't need to be for the betterment of others. It can be, and that can be fine, but there's no judgment here. This is like, what gets you pumped? What gets you excited? And so for me, it has always been adventure. I've always liked the idea of having really good stories. Ever since I was 5 years old, my grandfather would tell me stories, and I was like, man, I'll never have stories like you. He's like, you'll make stories. I didn't feel that way. And so I always wanted to have good stories to tell, and that to me came through adventure, kind of like whether it's Huck Finn or like Shackleton or whatever. And so my hubcap at the center is to live a life of adventure. And then what you do is you say in each of these 5 categories, what is living a life of adventure financially, or for family, or for friends, or for fun? And so then you put you spend time working on descriptors for each of those categories. And the more that you can make it like really pop, with those descriptors, the better, because then you'll really know what it embodies. So for me, for fun, it was like to be I forget what, man, I need to look back at my sheet, because you're supposed to do this once a year and then check in every quarter. A fun phantom. So for fun, I want my descriptor was to be a fun phantom, and so what that meant was doing things like this, where I'm dressed as this mystic fella, and nobody knows it's happening, but I think it's fun, and it's just like I dropped the phantom fun on everyone that's in the office today. So then you put goals to each of those that you could strive for each year. So that like wheel exercise helped me help me find traction through the like purpose, where it's like, okay, for now I'm saying I want to live a life of adventure. How does it manifest in these categories, and what are those things? And let me get my fun category up and my friends category up. So that's why this year, now in 25, as we transition ahead, a lot of my discovery is like, okay, I need to build more deep relationships, because I don't feel I have a lot of deep relationships with people. I have a lot of stuff in the company or in the close network, but I'm looking for broader relationships. And so I've already joined a number of groups that's helping me do that. And then in the fun category, it's like, okay, well, this is a lot of those adventures. Back to Bill Perkins with like, what do I have the health to do right now? It's like, okay, Aconcagua, I'm now looking, you were asking about other adventures. I've already, since December, I've done, I think, 5 trips. Not all as extreme as South America, but just different adventures. And this year I'm now planning, and I used the Jesse Itzler Big Ass Calendar to do this and some of his methodology, but I'm planning a bunch of micro adventures and big adventures that include things like I'm taking my mom on a safari. That's been on her bucket list, but she has never done it, so we're going to go do a safari. And I hadn't told you this one yet. What I'm trying to organize while I'm out there is what is something that would Jesse Itzler calls this your misogi. So his definition of a misogi is, what is something that would challenge you physically in a way that you'd have a 50% chance of completing, and then that way it can mark your year. So it's like maybe 24 would have been Aconcagua Summit or whatever. This next year, what could that be? Well, I've done a lot of endurance stuff, so I have pretty high confidence in a lot of the adventures I want to do. But I'm trying to organize a persistence hunt. So this persistence hunt is where it's these African tribes, back before they had bows and arrows and slings and stuff, they would chase down a gazelle or whatever on foot until the gazelle keeled over because they were from exhaustion. And that's how they would do their hunting. And so that's called a persistence hunt. So not very many tribes practice that anymore, obviously, because we have other ways
not
to harvest
the most efficient approach.
But I was like, well, shoot, man, that sounds scary. And I don't know, like, to do a persistence hunt through, like, the savannah with, like, lions and crap out there. And, like, you don't know how far this gazelle is going to go, or, like, I'm not going to be able to speak the language with these tribes people. If I can even get in, because a lot of these tribes that still practice this are very insulated and they don't let outsiders in. So that's what I'm trying to get done as my misogi this year, since I'm already going to be over there to take my mom on safari. I was like, let me try to do this persistence hunt. So anyways, that's the stuff that I'm like, that's going to fill the fun adventure bucket for now. All while I try to do more of this like self-discovery to say, what can I find a purpose? And if not, that whole Tony Robbins, like, live a life of adventure for me for now is pretty exciting. I like the sound of that. And what I still struggle with every now and then is the lack of the altruistic angle to it. And there are different ways that I feel like could be cop-outs with that, is like to like inspire other people to find their, thing. I think that a lot of other people have taken that angle. It's kind of like, I don't mean to poo-poo this, but like Simon Sinek's book, he has another book that came out in the last couple of years that was all about how to find your why, basically. And his like why is to like something like to like inspire 10,000 people to like, do their best work, something like that. And so I feel like I could take an angle like that, but that feels like I'm trying to force it at that point. It doesn't feel like I haven't yet embodied that angle. So instead I'm stuck on the adventure thing for now.
Mm-hmm. And how will you know when you've found it? Like, found purpose?
I don't know. I feel like it's going to be similar to like, finding your wife or something, where it's like, yep, that's the one, and you just know. Or that's how I'm holding out hope for now. I don't think it's like...
I didn't know if in that Harvard psychologist that you were referencing, if he gets at that. And there's a lot of different, obviously, I mean, there's countless books, podcasts about purpose, locating, or, what it means, all that stuff. But I just didn't know for you, given that you are in the early stages of this walkabout and discovery, if you had any kind of formula, the way that you were describing Tony Robbins with the 5 categories and, the hubcap of life, a life of adventure. like, are you at any risk of not actually recognizing it, or is it your assumption just going to be this unique feeling every day that you get up? You'll have this lucidness or clarity around what motivates you.
So I'll tell you, so there are different books. I referenced Second Mountain. That's one of the most popular books on this kind of topic. And they have their own ways of getting there, but they haven't connected totally with me. It wasn't done like Bill Perkins with his like formulaic engineer mind on how to get there. I mean, Simon's was a little bit, but there was still a lot of like, with Simon Sinek's, there's still a lot of like, I felt like creativity or something that was less concrete for me as far as like trying to go through that process. And what I haven't settled on is I view this like I'm very much in this mindset right now that you have these different phases or seasons of life. And so to me, it seems like you could have a different purpose for your 20s, 30s, or 40s versus your 60s, 70s, and 80s.
You beat me to where my next question was.
Okay.
Or isn't purpose transient? Is Simon Sinek 20 years from now still going to hold to that same purpose? It just seems not silly, but unrealistic to me that you would have an infinite purpose. Some people may scoff at that or be like, that's 100% what it's about. That's a true purpose, is that it is perpetual.
Yeah, I bet some people do. It's kind of, and some people don't. Like Gino Wickman, who did EOS and Traction. It's like it felt like for a while, his thing was consulting. Then it was like, let me build the system and roll it out. I think it was like the 10,000 companies and then 100,000 companies. And he was like, you know what? This is no longer for me. I've already set that ball rolling, and I'm going to go work on others. And he's doing a lot more self-development work kind of now in what he publishes. So I think some people may find that lifelong purpose, and that's okay. It's kind of like somebody that's like, they loved tennis when they were 6 and they love it when they're 60. Like, that's going to work for some people. And I think there's going to be other people that it kind of comes in and out of favor. And why can't that be okay too? And instead, I think it may be a little too idealistic, or for if you thought everybody was meant to have this one specific thing that's all they were supposed to do for their decades of life. So that's where I'm sitting now, but I haven't read that in any other book. That's just a current conclusion I'm arriving to.
Yeah. Well, I agree fully with that, and maybe part of that's been my own journey thus far. I think I've now hit the other side of that whole midlife, like, depending on how long I live. But and different things have, I guess, felt like a calling to me through different stages. And some of those are obvious ones, as far as like, being a father or being a husband, and then different work things, but then stuff on the side. But I can't say that, and I haven't maybe opened myself up enough to it, that there's some prevailing purpose other than giving, but that just seems too simple to me. But I would never want to go through life. Like, I know what I don't want, I guess. That's not necessarily maybe the best approach to this. Back to regrets. But I guess what I am saying is I would not want my purpose to be too self-fulfilling.
Expand on that.
Well, the whole altruistic thing, like I would want it to somehow, I would want it to be some vein, like a purpose that is giving, that impacts more than myself.
Yeah, I would. That's where I told you I'm unsettled right now. Is like that it doesn't, like, living a life of adventure is fun for me for now, but it, like, is that now? I think like that is so open ended. I could say that, like, okay, with raising Griffin, what does that look like? And that's okay. But so I in some ways I like it because it does kind of morph into saying like, okay, this is how I want to raise my kids with adventure, but. It doesn't, beyond the raising the kids, it's not, like, going back to Jesse Itzler for a minute, like, you could say he lives an adventurous life, and he likes, it seems that he gets energy from, like inspiring other people and, like telling them his adventures, and it's almost like public speaking kind of stuff, and that doesn't really get me. Like, I'm not really interested in, like, the fame or and I'm not saying he is either, but he gets energy out of that, and I don't think I would get energy out of that. So yeah, I struggle with that because I want it to impact other people, but I'm also questioning how much is that just society conditioning me to
totally.
say.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems convenient. Like if it's like I want to do something that I love, but it's not really for anybody else. But the good news is that people seeing me accomplish great feats or being so passionate about a specific craft, hobby, or skill or whatever inspires others. Therefore, whether it's intentional or not, I'm impacting others.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what I really set out to do. It was really just trying to find something that I could have joy day in and day out with. And the good news is that as people started to see that, they were inspired.
Yeah, and how much does it need to become the singular focus either? It's kind of like, is it Scott Poros or whatever, Jim Collins, like sort of mentor, become partner guy? Like he didn't, what I remember is Jim writing about how Scott didn't want to be famous and didn't need to be known for anything. It's like he just wanted to help those that were close to him in small batches, and over time he collected those people to where there was like 500 at his funeral, and that was one way to do it. And it seemed like, man, what he inspired in a way Jim to become Jim Collins that has touched hundreds of thousands of people, right? So hey, that's great too, right? You don't have to go straight to, like, I guess the Simon Sinek or Tony Robbins route where you're like, where you are the one physically or whatever emotionally touching these hundreds of thousands of people. And why can't that be okay? And did Scott or Collins only do that thing? No, I think they also did other things to keep well balanced and things that maybe just enjoyed them, that they just enjoyed. And so similarly, as I make more of these deep relationships with other people, I'm sharing what I'm learning, and that seems to help them, and that's good. And can't that be enough? Why does it need to be this grandiose like thing beyond that? So that's still what I'm asking myself, though. I'm still struggling with it.
Well, I love it. I think it's very interesting, and I'm going to try and open up my mind as much as I can when I see you, so that I can dive in and out of this very macro, like big topic. How has it felt, or has it not been long enough to even reflect on like 2 months out of the day-to-day? I feel like you were already working towards that, the back half, if not most of the year, in a great way. You said more than anyone, at least between the three of us, that you wanted this someday, where it's like the business won't rely on me, and that'll provide options. And so you've achieved that, but yeah, just in the last 2 months, have you thought about Digible?
So a couple of things backing up. Very shortly after we started the company, Rand Fishkin's book came out, Lost and Founder, and I think we've talked about that on this before. But to me, that hit me hard because it felt like Moz became dependent on him, and that he felt that he couldn't step away without hurting the company, and that gave him a lot of angst, and I didn't want that to happen to me. So for years, ever since even I was running the organic team, every team I ran, I was like, hey, my goal here is to work myself out of a job. Like, I don't want to have to be, and I meant for that team, but also for the company. I didn't want to have to be a key person risk. And I felt that probably around employee 50 is when I was like, okay, I believe I add value, yet I don't think I'm like, the company would fail without me. So then I started to feel more freedom to take vacation or what have you. And then as time went, we went from 50 to 100 people. I felt more and more secure in that way, and that was great. So I think that's why I got really comfortable through 24, through a lot of this self-discovery process, to be like, okay, it is okay. But that's not to say it wasn't stressful. So I haven't talked about this. I was super stressed, even with all this. What seems like I was like hit enlightenment in 24 or something. There was a lot of frustration, as I was mentioning, through 23 with the purpose stuff, through 24 with figuring out, can I step away? And I actually started to lose my hair. Like, my hair started to fall out in clumps through sort of the summer of 24. I was like, that can't be good. This is because I'm stressing myself out about, like, well, if I step away, what if the company starts to do poorly? And part of it could have been, if I could have told myself, like, this, one of the things I can fall in, like, I can get trapped by, is thinking that this decision is permanent, versus like, if something happens, you will adjust. And it's like, if the company starts to falter somehow, then you'll adjust, and that's okay. And that also even manifested in after I got back from Argentina in January. I started to get real bad tooth sensitivity. Like if I breathed in air through my mouth, which I did not realize how much of a mouth breather I am, but when running it makes sense, but also just walking outside, I started to get like my teeth were lighting up with pain. They were just sensitive. And so I went to the dentist and he was like, hey man, if I didn't know better, I'd say you were bulimic. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're all of the enamel on the bottom row of your teeth is gone. It looks like you had this extreme bulimia through, and he's like, that's the only time I've ever seen this. So now I feel like now I'm going into the dentist to get all this work done to try to like shore up the enamel loss. But I just didn't realize like how much, I guess how torn I was about this whole process through the last number of years. Because he had pictures from before 24 and then after 24. And just seeing those pictures, I was like, your dentist should show you pictures more frequently. Because I didn't realize they took all these photos. And I was like, this would make an impact on me if you told me to floss more or whatever.
Yeah, right.
If I saw these photos. So anyways, he was just like, this is why he's like, you gotta keep stress down because of this thing. I'm like, shoot, man, if I lost my hair and if I'm losing my teeth, what else has my body taken from a stress standpoint that I'm not aware of?
Yeah.
So anyways, that was eye-opening. How did I get on that subject? Well, I guess just that it's not a clear line.
I was trying to tee up like what the last 2 months felt like and how you're thinking about Digible.
Right. Thank you. Good callback. So going into it before December, I was super nervous about the day-to-day. Like I was because I really enjoy structure and I really enjoy being able to see momentum build. I also feel that I have certain skills now. It's kind of like your book mastery where it's like, this is going to atrophy now, or like the value of my network is going to decay. It's got a half-life on it. So I was worried about these sort of like almost like assets I'd built up and how those are going to waste away. And like, am I doing myself a disservice? 10 years from now, would I regret it, kind of thing? And without the structure of day-to-day, I worried about being home alone, frankly. And sure, I will go on these adventures and stuff, but that's not every day because I got a kid to raise and family duties. So how will I spend my days, and how will I not feel lonely? And that took me back to what I was afraid of is feeling in my early 20s after my first startup, where I felt this like just insane solitude in a way, in a negative sense, where I didn't feel like I had a safety net. I didn't feel like I had deep friend relationships. And I was like, if this startup fails, that's it. I'm toast. I'm on the streets or what have you. And I just remember feeling that kind of like lost sort of angle. And I was like, another Tony Robbins exercises uncovers like what you run away from versus what you run towards. And you sort of play this out in your state today. And then your coach will ask you, do you still need to be running away from those things? So I was running away from like this loneliness feeling or directionless feeling, also running away from this like financial insecurity feeling. And they're like, do you need to be running away from those anymore? Is that serving you? And I was like, shoot, no, actually that's not serving me. So I need to reprogram myself to like not have those as be the things I'm running away from, and swap them out. So that was a healthy exercise. All that to say is then after I came back in January, I had this stack of, it's kind of what you were saying, this self-development work I wanted to do, but it's hard to have, we weren't giving ourselves, or in particular me, the space in my day-to-day while working at the company to do these exercises, this really deep work, like internal journaling, reflection, kind of like unpacking the deep why behind things. And one of those things that's been super helpful, Nicole gave me this book, I think it's called The Story of You, or What's Your Story? And it's based on these people that normally take people through kind of like a workshop that, and they just package it into a book, and it's got, I don't know, like 100 really deep thought-provoking questions. And so it's like, I spend like the first 3 or 4 hours of my day deeply reflecting on that. Then I do some like voice journaling. Then I do some of this other work, like with Second Mountain and some of this other stuff. And so next thing I know, it's like, shoot, man, if you put in like 4 hours of work, like deep introspective work, you are like exhausted. It's like and it just takes, you need a lot of time to unpack it, because the stuff you unpacked in session, it's probably like therapy. And in session 1 is like by session 10, you may need to go back and rework some of that stuff. So anyways, I was really scared. And the scariest thing was feeling that loneliness that I had been running away from for so long, or the directionless part. But instead it's like, nope, your direction is this blue ocean of discovery. Get comfortable with that. And for now, you've got a lot of resources to work through to like try to figure out which direction you're going into this blue ocean, and be okay with that, even though you don't know the destination. I mean, again, I could say destination is purpose, but accepting that I may not find that, that's been the hard part. So,
yeah, no doubt. Well, there was a lot there. 2 questions for me really surface. One is more somewhat of surprise or curiosity. You mentioned the social, like the solitude, the loneliness, like what it would feel like out of the day-to-day, the network decay, half-life, etc. And maybe it's because I'm projecting, but also knowing you or thinking that I knew you, that wouldn't be as big of a concern as productivity. You and I both have said we're pretty restless souls. Like, we know that if we were to step out of the business, that we couldn't just, sit in our houses, whether we're raising a kid or whether I was writing or you were running, I mean, that's not sitting in the house, but just that there's this need for productivity. I don't know if you've ever said that explicitly to me, but it's just something I feel like I've seen or we've talked about together. So interesting to me that you talked more about the loneliness or the fear of loneliness and solitude as a result of this transition than of the, staying productive. But maybe it's because you already had that part accounted for, figured out.
No, it's because I didn't. I hear you. That is kind of the lack of progress that scares me. Okay. But I'm taking the lack of progress to be like, hey, if you're filling out this workbook, that is progress. I can't seem to feel the impact of it personally yet. So I'm almost relying on other people around me, whether it's Nicole or you after this conversation, to be like, hey, this is very different than a year ago, to sort of see those milestones. But those are the milestones that normally I would have used a revenue chart or something to say like, hey, success, right?
Yeah.
So that's still not easy, but the greater fear was the directionless part. Mm-hmm. That's like the number one. That had been the number one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could be completely off, I can speculate it, but I'm not going to do that right now in this moment, but that I'm looking for more solitude. I felt just suffocated at times, not all the time, but by the pressure of maintaining relationships. So I look forward to that opportunity to just be with my family, whether I'm doing writing or whatever. Like I don't know if it's letting go, because I don't know that I'd be fully letting go, but yeah, I won't go further with that. I just that stresses me out. It stressed me out for years. And so if I ever get to that point, yeah, I think I'm going to embrace the solitude.
I think I hear you. It's been, that part is, so again, that's where the directionless, I always thought it felt lonely, but it's the directionless thing that was more the scare. But I also, we've read, whether it's Peter Attia's work or Huberman, they all talk about how you need close relationships for a healthy, long life. Mm-hmm. And I just don't have a very big Post-it note there, or I haven't felt I did. And I am enjoying the space. So I'm giving myself lots of space to do this journaling and these other workbooks and things and the introspective thinking. And yet also trying to like open myself up to other relationships, because I was very closed to relationships in the past, just because I'm focused on this thing. You might distract me kind of, as far as like letting people like really into the inner circle. But the solitude, that meaning like having like, a half day or whatever open with no plans, what I thought was scary has now been like very invigorating, because I can really, it's like you and I almost, our podcast was like the only time to do that before. I was like, let's deeply think about a topic. Now I have more time to do that. And also I can understand where you're coming from too, because I'm working with Nicole, right? So working with her, it's like we get a lot of connection that way versus outside. And Griff, doesn't talk really yet, right? He's still early. So
it's
like
coming sooner than you'd expect.
I know. So I think if he was more interactive, that would feel different. Where I'm like, hey, I want to spend more time with this kid. He just hasn't been there yet.
Yeah. Yep. Well, what about your identity? So I think I mentioned this to you, but I went through an exercise of self-worth with my therapist. I don't remember if I told you that. But I got on this thread, not a shocker, of purpose, mission, identity, and it took us to self-worth. And she just simply asked, like, how would you categorize that for yourself right now? And so a little bit like of your Tony Robbins, and then what would the weighting be? And I was like, well, obviously, the company is a big part of my self-worth. And so is my family. And I struggled for a second, maybe longer than a second, to get beyond that, or underneath it. So either like, is there another big category besides those two for me? And if there's not, then what lies underneath those two big categories? And maybe that would make me feel better about myself. And she was just saying, person at this point in my life, and with so much invested, which is not uncommon for many of us to invest in our families, but to invest in a business as a founder, and to be where we're at, that it wasn't that was dangerous, but just acknowledging how much that's accounting for in my self-worth. And so I went into the pie chart and I was like, I don't love the idea of just those two. And I'm connecting this back to you, and it's early, but just I feel like that was some of what you and I talked about as we forecasted further ahead. And, if we were ever to move out of the day-to-day of Digible, how that would impact our sense of self. And I know that sense of self isn't exactly self-worth, but I'm trying to make this bridge. And where I got with my therapist was, I feel better because I spent a few weeks on it, coming back and saying I actually have 12. I think I ended up with 12 different categories for my self-worth. And she was like, this is really good. Usually most people don't get past kind of 4 or 5 kind of buckets. And I was like, yeah, but many of them, back to now you're waiting, are not anywhere near the percentages that I'd like them to be. And so it was almost like a portfolio, but it's like it's an imbalanced portfolio of self-worth. And I want this picture. This is more my desired state for self-worth. And then I was trying to back into purpose. It's like, is this going to lead me to purpose? Like, back to how do you find it? This would be a way more kind of engineering Bill Perkins method maybe of trying to flesh it out better. It didn't work that way. I still want to keep spending some time on it. But I'll bring this back to you now. I can't imagine that you'd argue that Digible had become a big part of your identity. But maybe you would. And how has that felt in the last 2 months, or have you not felt that at all? Where it's like, when I think about, my identity as a person, a large portion of that is Digible, or had to have been.
Well, how maybe
I'm probably like putting too much on your projecting, but I was just trying to get at, like, has that hit you at all, or is it like, no, this is still very much part of my identity? Just because I stepped out of the day-to-day doesn't mean that it's not very much still a part of my identity.
Let's clarify first, identity versus self-worth. Like, what is self-worth exactly?
Where you find worth in your
yourself.
Yeah, but where you find worth in yourself. Yeah, I mean, it is just transposing it. But when you think of your sense of self, like, where do you find value?
So it's almost like, is it almost like how much do I add to the world kind of thing, or like in what areas do I add to the world? Or I'm just wanting to clarify, because
that's one way of getting there. I did mention being a global citizen. It's like, I mean, and I think we did talk about Bill Perkins, all that stuff. And like, that may have gotten that whole thing started, in fact, because I was like, where do I find value, in myself, those around me? But eventually, it went straight to this whole self-worth exercise. But I don't know that it's wrong or right, but she rolled with it. I was like, I'm just using this as an example, but what do you mean by global citizen? I was like, well, I feel like I'm thoughtful about, the environment, the way that I treat people by obeying, the laws that govern us, life principles, those types of things. I mean, I'm just using this as an easy, small example. And then she said, well, what percentage would you put on that? And I was like, well, relative to these others, not very high. And she's like, is that something that you want to change? Where, as a global citizen, since you seem to find self-worth in that, instead of, let's say, 1%, you'd prefer that to be 5%. That's not exactly answering your question, but I was just trying to unpack a little bit more in how we were seeing self-worth.
The example is helpful. And then on identity, it sounds like it's connected, but a little different. Like, meaning...
Yeah, because your identity, it's like, when I think about what represents me, that doesn't necessarily mean worth, where I find self-worth. I mean, it could be things that I don't really love about myself, but I know are part of my identity. Is I am not great with maintaining relationships, I don't know, outside of work. And everybody that's been in my circle or been around me long enough knows that.
Got it. So
I'm not finding any self-worth with that. That's just part of my identity.
But that might be one of the, like, almost like a descriptor. Because when I think of identity, I think about some of the stuff that I think that was Atomic Habits, right? Where if you're like, I'm a runner. Like, if you start calling yourself a runner or an athlete, then it's like you'll start.
But that's desired, not current. But I know where I think I'm with you on that.
Yeah, but you're labeling yourself or describing yourself in some way. And what you're saying is, like, one of the descriptors, those identity descriptors can have almost like you're not proud of or whatever. It just is what it is. Maybe it's less about the proud, because it almost kind of says something about judgment. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'd heard from all the studying I did of other founders, because I knew, I think it was for the last 4 years, I'd been thinking, like, someday I won't be a part of the day-to-day of Digible, so I can't make that my whole identity. And many of these other founders, that's what they struggle with through the different conversations and interviews and books I've read. And I don't know if we talked about this, but there's been some studies that have done where they will flash founders' kids in front of them while they monitor their brain. Then they'll flash the company logo, and like they get their brain lights up the same way about the company logo as their kids' faces. So like that's how attached many founders get. And I didn't want it to feel like that, almost like a disowned a family member or something if I'm out of the day-to-day. So it may not have hit me yet, but so far I haven't felt this like that, like almost like missing piece. And I don't know if that's part of what you and I have talked about. Like you can no longer be the CEO of something, but you can't take away like founding something. So I don't know if that's why that hasn't hit me. But the most glaring, where I get reminded of it the most, is as I join these other entrepreneurship networks. I'm one of the very few people in these networks that is not in a company right now or like working on something right now. I just went there to find other people that have had similar experiences. And in some ways that's made it sometimes hard to get into the group, because they'll be like, hey, you're not active in your company. Like, why are we going to let you in? And I'm like, well, okay. I mean,
that's exactly why they should let you in.
Yeah. It has felt very odd at times, almost like I'm in this no man's land where it's like, I can't go join, or the Rotary Club's not for me, but getting into this entrepreneurship club, they're like, well, I don't know if this is for you because you're not working on something. But yeah, it's just been weird. And so I've only had it weird in that way. And oftentimes when they do let you in, there's like required, what is your current or what is your company? And so then I'll have to label Digible there because I got nothing else to go on. But in my like bio line, it'll always be like, not in a day-to-day kind of thing. So yeah, that's been where it's been weird. And yet so far it hasn't felt like, it's not like I'm like I don't feel like I'm tucking tail or like there's this big hole missing in the couple months it's been so far.
I think that's great. Yeah. I really do. Like, because there were multiple times, and it may have been more mid-cycle, at least using the like our full timeline from when we founded, that both of us were fearful of that. I'm not saying we spent a ton of time there, but it's just like, what will life look like if we weren't in the day-to-day, fully vested into the company, because we had poured so much into it. And also, I, clearly had a lot of hopes and dreams for what it could look like for the next 20 or 30 years. But so I'm just happy to hear that doesn't even seem to be entering your brain right now.
I think in many ways, since a young person, I have often detached myself from the identity. Like, you'll know this, but I don't introduce myself as a runner or like as an ultra runner, or I just kind of shy away from it. It's like, that's something that I do sometimes, but I don't identify. And in some ways that's hurt me, because since I don't identify in that way, it doesn't let me reach. So like, even going to Chile, I was like, hey, Nicole, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Like, am I going to be fit enough to do this expedition? And she's like, what the hell are you talking about? You're probably going to be the fittest person there. And then next thing you know, I'm the only one that summits everything. But I went in there and I was the most nervous person. It seemed like the most nervous person there. And so I think allowing myself to identify in different ways has hurt me because I won't stretch as far, but has saved me in other ways. And maybe that's where I need therapy, is like, it's too much of a protective mechanism where it's like, I don't allow myself to get invested into that part of the identity, I guess, in order where it's like, well, what if I can't run one day and now I can't say I'm a runner anymore? Mm-hmm. Won't that be sad to have that die off? So I still have to do work there.
I think the trade-offs are probably more favorable that you haven't, I don't want to say fallen victim, but leaned into an identity-based approach to your life or self. Because I do see, I mean, you were just kind of getting at it, but maybe some of the value of embracing an identity and pushing or stretching yourself further than you ever have, versus protecting yourself from losing, some significant aspect of your identity, whether it's digital or whether it's running or, any part of your life. And I think that was part of the exercise that I was going through with my therapist, is she was like, it seems like you're interested in doing some de-risking, within this portfolio. And I said, yeah, maybe. I don't know yet, how much I think that should be a focus or priority for me over the coming years, or I think my energy's better spent somewhere else.
To pick up on that, I think that's where the Perkins work with Die with Zero is really interesting, because he would then say, like, back to getting the order right, he'd be like, just know what trade-off you're making, right? It's like, okay, if I'm investing into just the entrepreneurship of the company right now, I'm giving up, and Robbins would talk about that too. It's like, okay, you're going to let some things be of deficit right now, but understand that, and then come back to it on some occasion and remake the choice, right? Because what you don't want is the choice where you end up regretting it a decade later, and you're like, why was I so boneheaded and whatever. So I think you can't do everything all at once, right? So you got to make the choice and be okay with it.
Yeah, totally. Well, if we can wrap up with my other question / comment is hearing you talk through purpose. And I love the fact that you're accepting you may be part of the 80% instead of the 20, but also us agreeing that, at least from our perspectives, it sounds like it's mutual or shared, that purpose can evolve or change from decade to decade. It doesn't have to be one thing for all of your life. But it does make me think about one of my least favorite topics, which is attribution. So I'll connect this to digital marketing. It seems like a waste of time. It has to me for years to try and solve multi-touch, if people want to use the multi-touch part, but just digital marketing attribution. And it's because, as you've heard me say too many times, too much changes, from one search to the next. And so it's just moves too much. There's too many variables. It's not worth the investment of time, because I just keep coming back, same thing. It's going to change. is that applicable when it comes to trying to find purpose or understand purpose? Where it's like, so I might wake up one day and it hits me. I've opened myself up. I've done all the, the tooling, the frameworks, and boom. How much of that, I'm anticipating so much of that being where I'm at that moment in time, and it's maybe a leap to compare it to attribution and how fluid that is to me, like from day to day. And I'm just using our apartment, people searching for an apartment, like from day to day, that's going to be different. So maybe that's just not fair, a little bit too extreme of a comparison to purpose. But I feel like for me personally, it is just way too fluid. Like I may wake up one day, but then a few weeks later, a few months later, if I really put myself through the rigor of like what makes me happy and like went through all these different programs and therapy and questions and introspection, that I would come to a different conclusion, I guess. That I just have a hard time believing that if somebody gave me a process, or even if I just went through my own process with that kind of rigor, that I would come to a similar conclusion, even in the span of a few months. And, I'm just sharing, like speaking, openly about how I think about it. And I've never even put this much attention into it. So, talk about our public learning and just being raw. But yeah, it's just like so intense, and there's so many things that I would think about to try and get there. But that may be the cynic in me. The optimist or the hopeful one is that it hits me and it just sticks. And it's like, I could do this process and this work and spend years or months on this, and it's just going to keep coming out the same and the same and the same. And how amazing that would be, like to have that level of clarity and conviction and confidence that I have this prevailing purpose. But knowing the way my mind works and humanity and life stages, variables, interests, health, finance, just those are all variables. I'm starting to listen that's just not reality. I'm going to end up with a different conclusion.
Did you watch that show Dark Matter?
Isn't that the one with the German, or no?
Oh no, you're talking the Dark is the one you're thinking.
Dark, okay.
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen Dark.
Okay,
Matter.
it's a really good book, and then they did an Apple show that you should.
I've seen it advertised, but I just
Yeah, but basically it's like the multiverse. It's like they give this in the first episode, but basically like there are infinite versions of you, and they lead different lives. Mm-hmm. It's like sliding doors kind of theory.
Yep.
And so isn't that okay in a way? Versus like, is there really only one path that you are meant to walk? Instead, to me, it's almost more of like, which path am I choosing to walk? And then that is kind of where I get scared, because like that has been the one challenge since leaving that I've struggled with, which is the paradox of choice. Now I feel like I can do anything, and now it's like, freak, what do I do? So that's where my filter right now has been like, I'm going to say yes more often, because then that's less of a choice. And I'm actually in the middle of reading this one book. It's very, I'll call it spiritual, because I don't know what other word to describe it. And I'm not a spiritual person. You have not yet. Know that. Yeah, right. Yeah, I dress as one, but I'm not that. Dress as if. Dress for the job you want, right? Not the job you have.
That's right.
Anyways, it's called The Surrender Experiment. It's about this very successful entrepreneur, and now he's written like 4 or 5 books, and he just like sort of surrenders to the universe and like see where it takes him. And I'm like halfway through the book, so it's fascinating the way his life it's kind of like Forrest Gump style. It feels like the way his life works out. Because he's just surrendering. The whole process is him letting go of the control and surrendering to it. But he has you could not argue that he is a successful individual. And so I'm still getting comfortable with that. But it's like, do I want to surrender and just say yes more often? Because then what's our other guy that wrote the book that's like basically say no to everything?
Oh, Bill McKeon.
Essentialism?
Bill McKeon.
Okay.
Yeah, isn't it? or Bob McKeon. I don't know. Yes, essentialism.
Well, essentialism,
yes.
like that. I understand there is a place for essentialism, and yet I think in this phase I'm in, it's more about the like, let me open up, or as he would say, surrender, and see where that takes me. And if I think about sliding doors, or I even told Nicole this. I don't know if you and I talked about it, but back before I moved to Colorado, I was offered a job at Google, and I turned it down. And it's like, what a different life I would have. We would have never met. Nicole and I would never met, right? It's like everything would change, and I should have probably taken that job, like from where I was at, and I just didn't. And so, anyways,
what was the job?
It was sales.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would have been good at it, but I just didn't want to take a sales job. And then I went to Colorado and took a sales job. But anyway, so if you think about there's infinite versions of you or possibilities, and it's like, what path are you choosing to walk? And that's where I'm a little bit in the paradox of choice. So I'm like seeing what ends up speaking to me, and then I'll do that for now, right? And then see. But I don't know that there's a absolute right answer, almost like a soulmate of purpose, or that's not what I don't know that thinking that serves me, right? If I believe there's only one right answer, that I don't think is the best for me at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you on that.
So, all right.
Well, much more to come, for sure. We're going to be spending time on what we often do, and then on things that we often don't. Well, at least that's my expectation for Digible Dudes in 2025. Who the hell knows what we'll be chatting about? But you will be joining me on some conferences, and we'll have some regularity, like, with the show. I don't know where the hell I'm going with this, but I'm just saying,
like, what can they expect? It should be
trying to set expectations.
Should feel like more the same. Like there should be a fairly regular weekly cadence. We just got to get our schedules worked out now that we're on different sort of like calendars. But otherwise, I'm sure I'll bring more of this kind of stuff in, and which then maybe like poke you. Just different ways as you work through it. So it'll be interesting because I won't know what you're talking about. You'll have to explain it to me, which might be good for the audience. They'll be like, what is he?
No, I think the audience is in deep shit if that's where this turns.
But
it's me trying to explain things to you.
That is helpful. Like for now, like if anybody's been emailing my email, I'm not looking at that. So email Reid, because that's not.
Don't email me either.
Well,
just accept that.
No one's responding.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah, I'm just not looking, so then you won't see it. So
yeah. Well, cool.
All right. Well,
thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
This is awesome.
Until next time.